There is a two-lane county road about 30 miles north of Denver where the land goes flat and stays flat. Winter wheat on one side, a grain elevator standing alone against the sky, a new subdivision going up at the edge of a town most people have never driven through on purpose. No derricks on the horizon, no refinery flares, nothing that looks like an oil field at all. Ordinary, flat, completely unremarkable. Except a mile beneath that wheat field, buried under layers of shale and sandstone, sits a bed of chalk laid down by an ocean that no longer exists. And 8 out of every 10 barrels of crude oil produced in the state of Colorado come out of the county you are standing in. That is not the strange part. The strange part is the scale of it. Weld County sits on Wattenberg Field, which ranks among the top 10 oil and gas fields in the entire United States by proved reserves. The basin underneath is the largest in the Rocky Mountain West by a wide margin. It has produced upward of 500,000 barrels of crude a day. And outside the industry, almost nobody can name it. Not a spent field, not a historical curiosity. One of the largest sources of crude oil in America, sitting under wheat. So how does something this big stay invisible? And what does it cost a country to lose track of where its own oil comes from? This is Geoscope. If you want more of what sits under the ordinary parts of the map, subscribe. To understand how a basin this size stays invisible, you have to start with how little it looks like an oil basin in the first place. The DJ Basin covers roughly 70,000 square miles across northeastern Colorado, southeastern Wyoming, and slices of Nebraska and Kansas. Geologists also call it the Niobrara Play, after the rock that holds the oil. It takes its name from Denver and from Julesburg, a town in Colorado's northeast corner that most Americans have never heard of either. Almost none of it looks like Texas. No Permian-style landscape of pump jacks running to the horizon. No company towns built around the industry. The DJ sits under farmland, under ranchland, under the northern edge of one of the fastest-growing metropolitan corridors in the American West. Much of the drilling happens on pads tucked behind berms and sound walls, a few hundred yards from subdivisions and soccer fields. From ground level, the largest oil operation in Colorado is engineered specifically to be difficult to notice. That detail matters more than it sounds. Public attention follows visible things. The Permian is visible. The Bakken, in its boom years, was visible because thousands of workers arrived somewhere with nowhere to put them and the country noticed. The DJ never had that moment. It scaled up quietly, on private land, behind fences, in a state most Americans associate with skiing rather than crude oil. And for most of the last century, there was very little to notice. The Niobrara has been known to geologists for well over 100 years. It is chalk, laid down on the floor of the Western Interior Seaway, the shallow inland ocean that split North America during the Cretaceous. The organic material that settled there became the source of the oil. The chalk became the rock that holds it. The problem was never finding it. The problem was getting it out. Niobrara chalk is tight. The oil does not sit in an open reservoir waiting to be tapped the way it did at Spindletop. It is locked into rock with almost no natural permeability, spread thin across an enormous area. For decades, that made the formation a curiosity. Companies drilled it. Some wells worked. Most did not pay. And a basin with a great deal of oil and no economic way to reach it is, in practical terms, a basin with no oil. What changed was not the geology, it was the technique. Horizontal drilling and hydraulic fracturing, the same combination that unlocked the Bakken and built the modern Permian, turned the Niobrara from a known failure into a producing field. And because that technology story has been told almost entirely through Texas and North Dakota, the place where it worked, third, never got a chapter of its own. What makes the rock work here is not one target. It is several, stacked. The Niobrara in the DJ splits into 3 productive intervals, the A, B, and C benches, sitting roughly 5,500 to 8,500 feet down. Just beneath the C bench lies the Codell, a tight sandstone that leans toward natural gas, but which operators increasingly produce from the same wellbore. In plain terms, a company sets up one pad, drills down once, and sends horizontal wells outward into multiple layers of rock without moving the rig. The surface footprint stays small. The cost per barrel falls because the expensive vertical section gets shared across several producing zones. And those depths are shallow by modern standards. Deepwater exploration wells in the Gulf routinely pass 30,000 feet. A DJ well reaches its target at roughly a quarter of that, on land, within trucking distance of Denver. Less depth means less time, less steel, and a well that pays itself back faster. For years, the DJ carried some of the lowest break-even costs in the country, undercutting parts of the Permian. Shallow rock, stacked pay, small footprint, low break-even. That is why a basin sitting under suburbs and wheat fields could compete at all with regions that have entire states built around them. So how big is this really? Here is the first honest answer. It depends who is measuring, and that turns out to be part of the story. Colorado produced about 470,000 barrels of crude per day in 2025, and the overwhelming majority comes out of the DJ Weld County alone, is the source of 8 out of every 10 barrels the state produces. Wattenberg Field, most of which sits in Weld, ranks among the top 10 oil and gas fields in the United States by proved reserves. For scale, Colorado's output alone is more crude per day than Ecuador produces. One American state, most of it from one county, outproducing a member of OPEC. And there is nothing else nearby. This is the largest oil basin in the Rocky Mountain region by a wide margin. Colorado's 2 refineries, both near Denver, can process about 103,000 barrels a day, against a state consuming nearly 3 times that in refined products. The rest arrives by pipeline and rail from Wyoming, Texas, and Kansas, which means the crude coming out of Weld County does not mostly stay in Colorado. It leaves by pipeline into the national supply, the same as any other barrel. That is what importance means for a basin like this one. Not that a region depends on it, that the country quietly does without any particular awareness of where the barrels came from. But notice what those numbers had to be built out of. State totals, county shares, field rankings, because there is no single authoritative line item to point at. Published figures for the Niobrara disagree with each other, sometimes by hundreds of thousands of barrels a day, because the old federal reporting region drew its boundaries differently than the geology does, sweeping in counties from a separate basin 200 miles away. A place everyone measures differently is a place that is easy to lose track of. And in June of 2024, the federal government stopped tracking it separately at all. When the Energy Information Administration retired its long-running drilling productivity report and replaced it with new regional forecasts, it broke out 5 regions by name: the Permian, the Eagle Ford, the Bakken, Appalachia, Haynesville. Everything else, including the Niobrara and the Anadarko Basin in Oklahoma, was consolidated into one category, covering the rest of the lower 48. The reasoning was not sinister. The new tables organize production geographically, rather than by formation, and most American oil does come from counties overlying those 5 areas. Someone drew a line, and this basin fell on the far side of it. Here is the part worth sitting with. Of everything swept into that residual category, the Niobrara is the largest single piece. Not a marginal field, not a legacy play winding down. The biggest thing in the bucket labeled everything else. That is the precise sense in which this is America's most important oil basin nobody has heard of. Among the places the federal forecast no longer names, none of them is bigger. And a category is not a neutral thing. Analysts model the regions that get reported. Journalists write about the regions that get modeled. Policymakers debate the regions that get written about. A named line item generates its own attention, its own revisions when the numbers move. A residual bucket generates almost none. the DJ Basin did not shrink. It got reclassified. And in an information economy, being reclassified into everything else is functionally close to disappearing. Which brings us to the timing. This basin was not delisted at the top. It was delisted on the way down. Drilling in the DJ peaked around 30 active rigs a month and fell to an average of about 11. In early 2026, Baker Hughes counted roughly 15 rigs working the DJ Niobrara, rising to about 26 by March. The Permian ran well over 200 through the same period. The operator base collapsed too. More than 100 companies drilled here between 2014 and 2019, and the number fell by well over half in the years after. Permitting tells the same story. Colorado received 21 oil and gas well permit applications in 2025. Not 21,000. 21. Some of that is price. Some is inventory, because the best rock gets drilled first. And some is policy. Colorado passed Senate Bill 181 in 2019, rewriting how wells get permitted and handing local governments real authority over drilling. In 2024, the state enacted a new production fee. New cumulative impacts rules took effect in late 2024. None of this means the basin is finished. It is still producing at scale right now. But the direction is not the direction the surface suggests, and it is exactly the kind of slow change a residual category is worst at showing. A named region gets a headline when its numbers move. A basin folded into everything else can slide for years while the aggregate stays smooth enough that nobody asks why. Which means the two halves of this story are not in tension. They are the same fact. A basin matters most in the sense of being able to surprise a country, precisely when it is large enough to move the national number and invisible enough that nobody is watching it move. Here is why that matters far beyond one basin. American oil production set a record in 2025, averaging 13.6 million barrels per day. The federal forecast expects it to hold near that through 2026, then fall about 2% to 13.3 million in 2027. That would be the first annual decline in American crude production since 2021. Look at where the decline is expected to come from. Not offshore, where the Gulf and Alaska are projected to grow slightly. It is expected in the onshore lower 48, as lower prices reduce the incentive to drill. The forecast has West Texas Intermediate falling from $65 a barrel in 2025 to around $50 in 2027. Below the break-even prices, operators themselves report for the two largest Permian subbasins. In other words, the turn in American oil production is expected to happen inside exactly the category the DJ Basin now lives in. Hundreds of thousands of barrels a day, in a bucket with no name, in the part of the country where the national number is expected to start falling. The county road is still there. The wheat is still there. The grain elevator still stands alone against the sky, and the subdivision at the edge of town gets a little bigger every year. No derricks, no flares, no forest of steel breaking the horizon the way it does outside Midland. Just a well pad behind a berm, a low hum, and a truck turning onto the highway before dawn. 8 out of every 10 barrels of Colorado crude coming out of ground that looks from the road like nothing at all. America has spent a decade telling itself a story about where its oil comes from, and that story has 3 names in it. There is more. It sits under farmland north of Denver. It is the reason Colorado outproduces a member of OPEC, and the federal forecast that tracks the nation's supply stopped printing its name in the same stretch of years. Its rig count fell by 2/3. The barrels do not care whether anyone is watching. The forecasts do. The only question, as always, is what else is sitting inside a category nobody thought to open.